Dear friends, it's always a great pleasure to be with you on International Women's Day, and not least because I've always felt passionate about gender equality, and it angers me, frankly, and always has, the waste of the absence of gender equality that is visited on society. The other reason I'm happy to be here is because I know I'm always going to be inspired. And we've just heard from some exceptional young women who, through their own endeavour, have actually made a quantum leap in society and actually furthered their careers in a most inspiring way. And I hope that message, if nothing else this evening, you go away with, particularly other young people, say, I can, you can really do this. And here's the example in front of you. You know, none of us would be here if it wasn't for our mother. Think about that. It's a pretty powerful message. I don't think it's going to change in the foreseeable future. That's a pretty good starting point. But, you know, the prejudice against women, thousands of years old in a male-dominated culture, is unnatural, unrealistic, uneconomic, unpalatable, and frankly shameful, but goes back to biblical times. Those of us who are Christian and attend church will have read at the beginning of Lent, the period of self-denial, akin to Ramzan, the chapter in Genesis, chapters 2 and 3. First, we learn that God placed a man, Adam, in the Garden of Eden, and that in order to provide a companion, created a woman from one of the man's ribs. And it is, of course, the woman, Eve, who commits the sin of eating from the fruit of the tree. She gives Adam some, who, when confronted by God, blames the woman for having given it to him. Apart from inadvertently, perhaps pointing to the vacillating weakness of the man, who seems to have done exactly as he was told, it is small wonder, particularly among earlier and more credulous generations, who will have believed this story quite literally, that the prejudice against women is so deep-seated. I appreciate that the traditional roles of men and women can be regarded as having been imposed by a male-dominated society. But the fact remains that generally, and we've heard already, the male hunter-gatherer has been far less able to multitask than the matron of the home, who has to juggle childbirth and rearing, a career, home management, both practically and economically, domestic purchasing and planning, and food distribution. That is quite a tall order. And what I believe is an innate ability of women to manage all these often competing interests alive and well, i.e. to multitask, makes them far more rounded and able in many spheres, not least actually politics, where the need to do so many things simultaneously is so important, apart from the fact that women seem to be far less rowdy and polemical than men anyway. Now, many years ago, I helped found a charity which we called the Bangladesh Female Academy, which provided a school in a very poor part of northeast Bangladesh, where actually none existed at all. It was a conscious decision to educate girls rather than boys, as we knew it was the girls who were going to influence the rest of the family on issues of domestic science, health, nutrition, and cohesion. I am pleased to say that it flourishes to this day and now actually has the support of the Bangladesh government. Now we see some of those primitive positions to which I've referred alive today in Afghanistan and among peoples who have not heard the modern call of human rights and equality. Yet perhaps we should not be too surprised. Those rights have evolved only recently in the history of the world and have been developed only in living memory. It was only since the Married Women's Property Act of 1882, which I studied as a young barrister, that women ceased to be a chattel. Hitherto, on marriage, all the property they brought with them became the property of their husband, because they were not allowed to own property in their own right. Upon marriage, the husband and the wife became one person in law, as the property of the wife was surrendered to her husband, and her status as a separate legal personality with the ability to own property and sue and be sued solely in her own name ceased to exist. Women were limited in what they could inherit. On the other hand, women who never married or who were widowed maintained control over their property and inheritance, owned land and controlled property disposal. The Act did away with that anomaly, and an Act of the same name, some 12 years earlier, had actually enabled for the first time wages and property which a wife earned through her own work or inherited to be regarded as her separate property. So bearing in mind the Genesis text, it should come as no surprise that all Abrahamic faiths have seen such discrimination. In Jewish biblical law, a husband could divorce a wife if he chose to, but a wife could not divorce a husband without his consent. In Islam, we still see talaq, a universal, unilateral repudiation of the wife by the husband, which does not require the wife's consent. What I find interesting is that in so many of these male-dominated societies, there is nevertheless a reverence given to the matriarch. Only this week, for example, a Muslim friend of mine has had to postpone a major event involving a large number of guests because, sadly and unexpectedly, his mother has died, and he hastened back immediately to Bangladesh. The Roman Catholic Church has not fought institutionally against discrimination of women, yet reveres Mary, the mother of Jesus. Women cannot become priests, and although that is now different in the Anglican Church, it has changed there only in living memory. Maybe because it is so uncontroversial, it has gone largely unnoticed, but only by the succession of the Crown Act 2013, which came into effect in 2015, was the primogeniture law of succession to the British throne, which had entitled only male heirs to become monarch, altered so for those in line of succession born after the 28th of October 2011, the eldest child, regardless of gender, precedes any sibling. We may look back to a supposed golden age of Elizabeth I, but she became queen only because her younger brother, half-brother, Edward VI, had come to the throne first, and neither she nor Mary had any other male siblings. Now, so in so many fields, there is still so much catching up to do before we can declare that women hold their rightful place equal to men. My condemnation of this discrimination, which I voiced at the beginning, is based not just on ethical grounds, although I believe these to be paramount, but also on economic ones. According to the UN Development Programme, the Afghan economy lost $5 billion since August 2021, wiping out in less than a year what it had taken 10 years to accumulate. And as the report states about the cost of excluding women, no country has prospered by leaving half of its population behind, and the loss to the Afghan economy alone is estimated at $1 billion a year on limits, through limits placed on education, skills, dignities, and capabilities investments. In neighboring Iran, under another perverted form of Islam, there are some 1,200 girls in hospital still, and the youthful unrest continues following the death of 22-year-old Masha Amini on September the 16th while in police custody for allegedly wearing a headscarf improperly. It is another example of aging male clerics seeking to humiliate women and deny them their rights. We should salute and support the women of Iran. Now, I've never understood why certain men feel so uncomfortable about having educated and sophisticated women as their equals, unless they are, as has been mentioned, fearful of their own inadequacies being exposed in comparison. Advances have been made. We have the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, the body of independent experts that monitors implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted by the UN General Assembly. It entered into force as an international treaty on the 3rd of September 1981, after the 20th country had ratified it. By the 10th anniversary of the convention in 1989, almost 100 nations had agreed to be bound by its provisions, and the convention now has currently 189 states parties. So thus, the vast majority of the member states of the UN have voluntarily agreed to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the human rights of women under all circumstances. The 6 UN member states that have not ratified or acceded to the convention are Iran, Palau, Somalia, Sudan, Tonga, and the United States. The one non-UN member that has not acceded is the Holy See, the Vatican City. So in conclusion, I say, we must do all that we can to bring these states on board and to scrutinize those that are bound by it to ensure that they respect its provision. And may we all, men and women together, have the strength and perseverance to succeed. Thank you very much.